I think all of us, we know her from her books, but I will do my second time introduction for Alev Hanım with great pleasure. So she is also a well-known author in Turkey. In Turkey, she is known as Alev Aksoy Croutier. She was born in Izmir, Turkey. She is a novelist and a scenarist. Her books have been translated into 22 languages based on the Google, but she mentioned, I think, 28 books, 28 different languages. So she is the author of the non-fiction books, including Harem, The World Behind the Veil, and Taking the Water, and the novel, The Palace of Tears, Seven Houses, and the Third Woman. She studied comparative... Leyla, I have you, Leyla. So it is great. So I am so happy. Thank you. She studied comparative literature at Roberts College in Istanbul. She then moved to US, Ohio, Oberlin College. She pursued her study in film at NYU. And Croutier also, she has been taught like in different institutions, including Dartmouth, Goddard, and San Francisco State University. And she is giving lectures at many universities, including, I think, again, San Francisco State University, and museums and libraries. She has also a great career in screenwriting. She worked as a screenwriter in Japan, Turkey, several European cities, and at US. She received a Guggenheim Fellowship for the Tell Me a Riddle, based on the Tilly Olson's book or novel. Also, Alev Croutier has done also numerous radio shows and TV documentaries. She was the commentator of Canadian Film Board series, The Powder Room, BBC's Mozart in Turkey, Channel 4's Reign of Women, and Harem. She gives talks on Orientalism, Middle Eastern women, Harem, and Turkey. Currently, she continues her work in San Francisco. Again, I am sorry about my kind of mix-up because I am so excited to introduce her. And so it is her turn right now. Thank you. Welcome.
Thanks so much. It's nice to see you. Well, to have seen you. Yes, and to see you again, Sibel. And I'm happy to be here and to answer any of the questions. Murat Bey has told me that everyone has read Harem and Seven Houses, right?
Yes, we read Harem and Seven Houses, and we have several questions. But we'd like to hear from you first. Your story. How did you come here? How did you become a writer? We want to hear from you first.
Well, I have a childhood friend here, and you were here when we started talking, and we used to play together when we were children in Izmir. It's an amazing story. I don't remember it, except we met later in the 70s, I think, in LA, and that I remember, but I don't remember your name anymore.
Altan Erish.
Altan Erish. Yes, your father was my doctor. He came to our house, and I was born in the house, and so I remember your father better than you.
Well, probably. I wouldn't say we were, I mean, you were, of course, a little bit younger than I was. And, anyway, so it was something that when I was reading one of your books, I don't know which one it is, you were talking about your past and your father and mother, and this it rang a bell because we had met them again in 1970 when they came to visit us in Izmir when we had returned to Turkey from US. That's when I made the connection, the fact that you were the girl, and the name Alev, of course, that stayed with me. Alev is a very, I wouldn't say uncommon, but
For our generation, it was very uncommon.
It's
Now there are many more Alevs, both male and female.
so,
The
because
cross-gender name.
yeah. As a matter of fact, they used to tease us because we used to take naps together. We were that small, so slept together, in other words.
Yeah. So that's where the story begins, in Karataş, Izmir. And Altan Bey's father, who was a doctor, obviously, he delivered me. So I'm grateful. It's a great coincidence. And we moved to Ankara, and I went to ilkokul in Ankara, Sarar Okulu. It doesn't exist anymore. I don't think it does, but it was the best school in Ankara in those days, and it has given a lot of really fine people. It has, who am I thinking about? Altar. Anyway, I can't remember people's last names, but it was a very, we had very good teachers, and so I spent ilkokul in Ankara, and then I went to Üsküdar Kız Koleji, and went to Orta School there. And then for lycée, I moved to Robert College, which was then American College for Girls. And it was not coeducational then, it was just girls. And Robert College was a separate college on the same campus as Anadolu Koleji. Anadolu Üniversitesi değil mi? Evet.
Boğaziçi.
Boğaziçi. Evet. İşte
It was Arnavutköy.
It was Arnavutköy. Yes, we were in Arnavutköy. Robert College was in Bebek.
Yeah.
And we had activities together. We had clubs, and we had dances together. So the boys would come to our college, and we had clubs, and we had parties.
Robert College. What years were you at Robert College?
Arnavutköy College.
College. I'm asking about Robert College, the upper one, where you got your literature degree.
I never, it was not called Robert College then, it was called American College for Girls. And then I was there until 63.
Oh, okay.
And so we use Robert College because American Girls College doesn't exist anymore. Nothing exists. My past is erased. And so I was always, my mother taught me how to write when I was 4 years old. And then it was the greatest discovery of my life to put all these signs together and be able to read them. And from that point on, I had no interest in any kind of toys, dolls, anything. Just I was interested in nothing but books. But it was a period, some of you who grew up there may remember, we didn't have too many children's books in those days. There were very few, and I'm sure my parents got me everything that was there. And I was very, I subscribed to Doğan Kardeş, a children's magazine. And look forward to every issue that we got. And so about 6 or 7 years old, I started publishing with them some poems and some children's stories. And so I decided I was going to be a writer when I grew up. And and I was very lucky at the beginning. I had very good literary teachers, and they encouraged me until my junior year in Arnavutköy Psikoloji. And then I had one teacher who's I couldn't write essays. I wasn't very good in writing nonfiction then. And she said, "You think you're going to be a writer? Well, forget it." And I thought, okay, so I guess that's not going to be my future. But I was brokenhearted. You know, I mean, it was one of the biggest blows, and I think it has hurt me deeply throughout my life, because for 10 years, I didn't write at all. And during that time, I wasn't really sure what I was going to be and what I was going to study. And those were very formative years of my life, from the age 16 to 26. And but that's really what happened. So I really believe that it's very, very important for teachers to empower children and to encourage them to follow what their passion is, and not break them because they think that they are not going to be successful. And then I had really an interesting experience years later, after I had already become a writer and published books and were making films. I went for a class reunion, and they brought this teacher on a wheelchair. She was then a pretty old woman. And she said, "Oh, I'm so proud of you." And I said, "You told me that I could never be a writer. You told me." And I stopped writing. And she said, "Oh, no, I could never have said that." And so, you know, that's such a paradox that, you know, I don't think it was a misunderstanding, but either people change, or maybe I was too insecure then, and, you know, that was a convenience to take her word. So, where are we? And then I came to Oberlin, which is in Ohio, as Sibel said, and Oberlin is the first coeducational school in the U.S. They were the first to accept women, and that was in 1850s. And so they're very famous for them. You know, they were always very strong in the equality of gender equality, and very academic school. And they were well endowed, although it was a small college in a small town. They were the Wright brothers of airplane fame went there, and they endowed the school. So, you know, we had very good facilities, and I was fortunate to be there. And because our schooling was so good in ACG, I skipped first 2 years. So I only had to go as a junior and a senior. And I think that's that happens still with some other students too when they come to U.S. Schools. So after Oberlin, I was getting ready to, I studied art history at Oberlin and thought, okay, so this will be my profession. I'll become an art historian. But I got an offer from a producer who was in filming in Hong Kong, and I had worked for him the previous summer as an assistant in Washington, D.C., and he said, I need someone to help. Would you work for me? Would you come here and help me shoot the film and basically help me produce it? So excuse me, the cat distracted me again. Anyway, so I took that as a great opportunity, even though it was out of my path, and to my parents' chagrin, because they missed me and I missed them, and they were ready for me to come back. But I went and we finished the film and then went to Japan to edit it. And I was fascinated with Japan. So I'm sorry. So I lived there for a year after we finished the film, and immersed myself in the culture as much as I could. I did different jobs like teaching English to Japanese corporate people, and who studied English at school, but they couldn't speak it at all. So I had to teach them how to have meetings, business meetings, with I knew little about, but so that was an interesting experience. And then I worked dubbing films from Japanese to English. Of course, I couldn't read Japanese, but the English was what I had to deal with. Anyway, so it was another one of these acts of fate that brought me to that experience. And then the film that I had worked on was invited to Berlin Film Festival. So it was time to go back to the European continent and go to the film festival and then go home. And went back to Istanbul and tried to find work, working in films. And unfortunately, I wasn't very successful. And except I got to work only on one film, and it was about a camp for boys, and near Samsun, and they were. I had to shoot this film about how the Turkish boys were sharing köfte, and the American boys were sharing hot dogs. So that was the film experience. And then it became clear to me that if I wanted to pursue that career, I had to come back to the US, and went to New York and studied film, worked at PBS, which was then called NET, National Educational Television, which later became the public television, and made some short films of my own, and eventually was offered some work in Hollywood and came and worked on some films there and started writing screenplays. And I just really sound like a dilettante to hear myself speak about, I just from going from one thing to another, but I really think that was my kismet, it was my destiny to have gone through those different paths, to have the experience to be able to really become a writer. And then I wrote books, and I was a founder of a publishing house in San Francisco called Mercury House, and was the executive editor for 10 years. And then I started working as a freelance writer, and it's been like that ever since. So, in short, is that what you were hoping to hear, Murat Bey, or you heard much too much, maybe more than you expected? What?
You answered most of my questions. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So we can say goodbye?
No, we have more questions.
Good.
Many more. Is there anyone that would like to ask questions, or do you want me to ask my questions first? Okay. Please unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. Let me ask mine first. Then, we've seen it in different places that people call Izmir as Smyrna. We've read it in different books. We've read it in your book too. As a person who was born in Izmir, why would you call it Smyrna?
Well, that wasn't my original choice, but publishers and agents have a lot to say in that matter. In fact, sometimes there's just too much invasion about what a writer writes and how it's changed to market it.
Well, why would they change it? Oh, as a marketing material?
It was a marketing decision because they were under the impression that everybody knew about Smyrna and the history of Smyrna, but Izmir was not that well known. This is the way that it was explained to me.
I also wonder what made you start writing after the 10 years of discouragement, age 16 and 26 you said. How did you start writing after 10 years of discouragement?
I told you I was making short films, and at first it was on a shoestring, really low budget, and then because it was not very easy to raise funding for films. So, and I wasn't very happy with people who were writing the films that I wanted to make. So I decided the only way to deal with it for me was to write it. And I knew I may not be as good as some of the more experienced writers then, but that's what got me back into writing and gave me the confidence that, oh my God, I can write actually. And not only that, but I like this better, then I feel as a filmmaker, I'm much more in control, and because I can infuse my own vision. So that was the turning point.
I see. I wonder what takes a writer to be in PBS. As a writer, what would you recommend to young writers, especially to beginners, young authors? What takes to be PBS for them?
What takes them to be what?
To be in PBS. You said you had some programs in PBS as a writer.
I actually started, they were looking for a research assistant, and I applied for the job and they hired me. So I didn't start as a producer and eventually worked my way up to production but initially, you know, it was a really entry-level job. So, you know, that's one way, especially, but that you have to be really directed about what kind of books do you want to write. And at that point, it was documentaries, because that was what was available. But really, I was always hoping for the day to write something fictional. And to go back to your question, so it's not, I wouldn't really, well, one option is to go to a film school. And I think more and more people are doing that. And it was helpful. I think it's not a bad choice for a lot of people to choose that path. And if I were to do it again, would I do it? I'm not so sure. Because I think that you learn a certain way of doing things, and you don't have the freedom to you know, imagine and write what really would turn you on. And so, but it wouldn't be a bad thing. You know, I know that AFI is a very good school in LA, and both UCLA and USC are good film schools. So that would be one, but there's so many students too when you get out. Where do you go? If you're lucky, if you have connections, then you may get a beginning job, or if you're very, very brilliant, you may get a better chance. But what I would say to a writer is to keep writing, write every day. And no matter what, even if you are sitting to write and you feel like, I don't have any idea today, I don't feel like writing, I don't have anything to say, just sit down and write. Something will begin to happen. Write about how you're feeling when you're not writing. Oh, I can't write today because my mind is so empty, because I'm so worried about my sister's operation. And then things begin to happen and you write. You give yourself a certain amount of time to write. You write for an hour a day or 2 hours a day. Do it as if you're going to a job. And you know, go to your writing place, whether it's at Starbucks or you have a place in your house that you can write in, and write. And the other is to read profusely, and to read books that you can learn from, and keep doing that. And if you have the opportunity, it helps to form groups with other writers and just get together, share ideas, read your work to one another. For a long time, for about a decade, I held classes in my living room, and for beginner writers, mostly beginners, some with some experience, to mentor them. And so, you know, sometimes there are opportunities like that. I would recommend that, because then you're working with people while you're still in progress of writing, not after it's finished and somebody reads it and say, oh, you should have done it this way. And when you come to that point that you're finished, whatever it is that you're working on, don't show it to your friends. Show it to other professionals, because your friends will say, oh, that's wonderful. Or they'll say, oh, Aisha, you should have done it this way and it would be better. And they don't know about writing, or neither do they know the market of how to sell this. So that would be my recommendation. And then what? And then, you know, if you're writing for, well, whether you're writing for film or you're writing for publishing, the way that the industry is set up, you have to find an agent. And the agent, otherwise they won't read your writing unless you have connections in the publishing house or in the studio. Then you may be able to bypass that, but it's not very easy. And you also need someone to guide you through the whole labyrinth of publishing or film. Does that answer?
Yes, awesome, thank you.
Sure.
I received some questions from our book club friends, but some of them are here. Would you like Haluk Bey, would you like to ask your questions to Alev, or do you want me to ask your questions? Vega Hanım, is Haluk there? Okay, let me ask his questions.
Oh, I'm sure, sorry, were you talking to me?
I know, I was asking if Haluk is here.
Oh, okay, I can't see him.
Yes.
He is.
Hello.
First of all, I really enjoyed your books. I can say much about the books because we don't have a lot of time. So let me get to the questions right away. Magical realism.
Yes.
7 houses.
Yes.
To what purpose did you use magical realism? I'm not asking this in a critical fashion. I enjoyed it. I also read several books from Isabel Allende. So I'm just wondering from a...
Why I chose that? Yeah. Well, let's face it. I think most of us here, maybe all of us, grew up in Turkey. And Turkey is, life in Turkey has a lot of magic and magic realism, what is called that. I mean, we grew up with Evliyas and Öcü and all kinds of stories, folk stories, you know, people who worked for us, they would tell the most fascinating stories. Our grandparents, my grandparents, some of my paternal grandparents were from near Skopje. They're from Macedonia. And my grandmother would get together. There were 5 sisters. And my God, the stories they would tell, you know, just fascinated me as a child. And they weren't things that happened to us, but they happened and I believed them. It was their stories. And so You know, I think it's the foundation on some level of the whole country. And when I went to South America, I experienced the same thing. I was in Argentina, and the people were such amazing storytellers. And this, you know, still I would be writing like crazy the stories they were telling them. For example, one story was about two sisters, and they were very unfortunate. They were both very ugly, but the parents didn't want them to know how ugly they were. So they tell them that they were the most beautiful children, and that everybody else was ugly. So these kids grew up thinking they were the most beautiful. But I mean, this kind of thing is magic realism. And so what we call magic realism. And I really like it a lot because I think that realist fiction has become too redundant and too prosaic. And I like to take people into a different world. And I've become more and more realistic as I go along, but still, I think I'm heading back in that direction, although, you know, it's not, and yeah, Isabel Allende, and I became friends, and she, you know, really, she inspired me a lot, and we agreed on a lot of things. So does that answer?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. We are both Greg and I are fans of Isabel Allende. We are on her Facebook, and then we are fans of your books too.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so let someone else ask a question. Who else has a question?
Gülşah Hüsnüdağ is not here. She's one of our book club readers. She read both books, Harem and Seven Houses. She enjoyed both of them. She says, why did you name the book as Seven Houses? Well, there are actually 5.
Correction, there are 7 houses there.
What do you think? Why she would thought that there are 5 houses?
Well, let me see.
Excuse me, there are 7 houses. I really, after that question came on your chat, I really looked at although the last few houses are thinner, but there were 7 houses there.
Yes, I mean, there are visits, there are revisits when Amber and her daughter go back, and she takes her daughter to the houses that she used to live in. They're no longer the same. They're different houses.
Luke has another question. Ask him, you're not muted.
Oh, okay. So may I ask a question? Another question?
Sure. Of course.
Book 7 Houses. To my reading, it ends on a hopeful note. Amber realizes she has choice, not only choices, but many choices. And hopefully she'll work in the country to make it possible for other women to have similar type of freedom and choices.
Mm-hmm.
You left it, sort of undecided.
Yeah.
Do you have in mind note or a sad note?
Well, it's very interesting that you asked me that question, because recently I've been thinking about the 8th house.
Okay.
And it has a lot to do with, right now I'm in the process of selling my house in Turkey.
Okay.
Unfortunately. and but it just needs to be done. And so I thought about it, and it's the same house that the Essence of Honey Street. And it's not like it's very emotional for me, because it's not just selling a house, it's selling my childhood, my adolescence, all the characters that I knew there. I mean, it's so much more than a house, and my parents, and the neighborhood was very special. And you know, I'm sad about doing that. But so in terms of doing that, I think maybe I will write. Of course, it will be fictionalized, and it may not have anything to do with what's really going on, but then it may. So it's up here now, and it hasn't moved to the paper yet, or to my laptop.
Can I ask a question, Murat?
Please go ahead.
Was Esma based on someone in your family?
There are parts of Esma that were. She was a widow with 2 sons, but there is no Iskandar. I mean, not Iskandar, Suleiman.
Suleiman, okay.
And there's no love affair, and there's no nothing like that. But the characters remind me, I mean, they were, and the same thing as Camilla was like my mother.
Okay.
But there is no Iskandar, for example. There's no silk plantation. They're just, you know, I would say maybe about a quarter of
and I thought Esma was, for her time, quite independent.
Yes.
And buying a house in Izmir wouldn't go with what the man in her family said. So I thought that she was really a strong character.
Well, that wasn't my grandmother. She was widowed with 2 sons, and she was a refugee, really, and was able to buy this house and live there with her sons. But she was a very devout person. She was not adventurous like that. And I think that's the part of me that I wanted to be like. I wanted her to be like that. I'm in fiction. I love my grandmother the way she was. But for fiction, I thought that's what I wanted. And that reminds me of a story, actually, that Isabel told me. When she was still living in Chile, she was not a writer yet, but she was making translations of books from English to Spanish. And she was translating Barbara Cartland. And and you know, she's Barbara Cartland is romance fiction, and you know, and then he looked at me with penetrating eyes, and I became his slave right away, things like that. And so Isabel said, "Oh, I'm going to change this." So she made all her female characters very strong and you know, resistant. So I think we have a tendency to want to do that now. You know, we want to see our girls become stronger, and There's a definite tendency to want to do that.
I have a question about, not for seven houses, about the harem and woman in Orientalism. So your interest because of your grandmother, or what is your interest started with harem?
Okay, well, here's a question to all of you. What did you know about harem when you were going to school? The culture of harem. What did you know?
So what we knew, it was like the woman mostly getting captured through the, like, from the different countries.
Slave.
And that they were getting, like, dragging into the palace, like, special area, and who became the favorite. And then favorite son, the first son, is a potential candidate for being sultan. But if you are not favorite, maybe in your life you never seen the sultan, or if you have any kids, they might be any time get killed, because no option, favorite son will be sultan, and then the remaining, all of them, they will get killed. So
Yeah.
people always showing the harem like kind of the everyone eats grapes, fun or something. But it is kind of, for me, when I was also young, was thinking kind of created for the woman.
Well, you knew more than I did. So just as I explained in my introduction to harem, I knew nothing really, except that they had many wives, and there were they always competed and fought with each other to become the sultana, not so much to become the sultana is a queen, but the mother of the next sultan. So that was about all vaguely I knew. And I knew that they threw some women in sacks into the Bosphorus, and you know, just half-baked stories about it. And so my father took me to, it had just opened, to a private tour of Topkapı when I was visiting him long after I had lived here. And that was a haunting experience for you, because I thought, these are not just empty rooms like that. People lived here. You know, at one point, there were 2,000 women in these rooms that occupied it. Well, who were they? You know, what were they about? What do they do? And obviously, they weren't all queens and favorites. And who were, what were, so I was interested in suddenly finding out about it and reading something and learning about it. Well, I went to the bookstore in Topkapı and I said, I'd like to get some books on harem. And they said, they looked at me and they showed me one book, and it was about Topkapı, and showed plans of Topkapı, and Yeniçeriler buradan girermiş, bilmem, the eunuch's gate, and this is where the odalisque lived, etc. And so I thought, well, I'll find something. Maybe I'll find something out of Turkey, you know, here or somewhere in Europe. Well, I couldn't really, I found pieces of things, you know, there would be a paragraph or two related to harems, and then I get slightly obsessed with this, and I started collecting images that a lot, you know, as I used in the book, that a lot by different painters, mostly foreigners, and mostly from fantasy, because they would never be allowed in a harem. That's a fantasy. I can't hear you, Sibel, but...
Yes, I noticed, sorry. My question is, did you get any copy copyright for those pictures. So how did you get permission, or what is the background story about the pictures?
My publisher, luckily,
Okay,
got
good.
all the permissions for that book.
Mhm.
And I am really grateful because I started working on a book, and they offered me, they said, if you do the research, we'll pay you a lot more. And I thought, oh, well, I mean, I can do the research, but before the internet and all that, it would have been it would have killed me. So, but the publisher has a staff that exclusively does permissions, and they knew exactly who to reach in what museum, and so it was all cleared, and I didn't have to worry about copyright infringement or anything like that.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Metin Bey has a question. Can you unmute yourself, Metin? Okay, well, he does it.
But my question was, how do you get the inspiration or ideas from your books? But I think you have already answered that question. I think you're, picking things from your own, well, from Turkey, I would say, not necessarily your own life. Harem obviously wasn't your life. So, how about the seven? Where did you get the idea for the 7 houses?
It started with one story, and see if you can guess which one it is, which house or which story.
I'm not good at guessing, so please do. Go ahead.
It's the story with the other grandmother, the one who's living in Karşıyaka, and it was my mother's mother, my 100-year-old grandmother, and I hadn't seen her for several years, and my husband and I went to see her, and she didn't know, and she had the government had taken over her house, and because there was they built some kind of a building, and I don't think that people had much choice in those days, and there was a small cottage in the garden, so that's where she was living. She was living in a one-room cottage alone, 100 years old, and so we walked in quietly, and there was a kuyu there. There was a well, and slowly went, and she was sort of looking into the well, and she was lost in a world of her own. And I didn't want to disturb her. We almost walked out. And, but then she slowly raised her head and looked at me, and I looked at her, and we stood like that for maybe a minute or two. Neither of us said anything, but we were both tearing up, and we didn't say something like, "Oh, Alevciğim, hoş geldin canım, seni çok özledim," or anything like that. We just didn't say anything and just embraced each other. And this was also a very moving experience for my husband. So I wrote a short story about this moment, and then I started recalling other incidents, and so it was a group of short stories, more or less, and then I found things that connected them. and but it wasn't until later I decided that I wanted to really tell it from the house's perspective. I didn't start the book thinking this is what I'm going to do. I wish I had, but I mean, it doesn't matter because that was really one of these days, you know, I was driving and suddenly, you know, the light bulb comes out. I thought, oh, of course, I have to tell it from the, you know, we say if the walls can talk. And yeah, what if they talked and they could tell stories about the people who lived inside them? So,
So I have a question regarding the Haluk's question. So about the magic realism. Before you started Seven Houses, did you think about to write about magic realism, or during the writing it became magic realism? So do you know it is your start point or during the process?
I think it's my person. I enjoyed magic realistic ideas because I think there's a way that I look at the world, and there's been a lot of what would externally be considered magical that has happened to me. Like, you know, how I was thrown from one existence. It wasn't, you know, I had a path that I had set for myself. You know, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this, and this is my trajectory. But I was always thrown off to some other choice, and I had to choose then whether I wanted to. It's like coming to a fork in the road when you were going straight, and whether you want to try and see what happens if you just take the road that veers in another direction. So yeah, I like to tell stories.
Anyone, I have another question. When you have so many different characters in your book, and you have to develop those characters during the pace of the book, pace of the stories. Do you find yourself developing those characters based on your personal experience, your life in the past, or from the books that you read, or how do you develop those characters?
Well, there's always something from my own experience or thought or family or friends or places that I've visited that start with an idea, and then as I write, it begins to transform itself into something other. New characters are added that I don't know where they come from. They come from a fictional world that you connect to when you begin writing. It just happens. It's happened to every writer who write fiction. They talk about this, you know, you go into another reality, a fictional reality. And it's very difficult to be with other people during the time that you're actively writing, because you're in a trance in another world. And it's very difficult to shift and go into some other reality.
Do you take notes in the
Do you go to writing
diary?
Sorry, Murat, interrupt, but I got excited. So when you write something, do you like kind of isolate yourself for a while, or during your daily life also meanwhile you write, or you go to camp, full isolation?
I isolate myself completely. I even go somewhere else from home, somewhere neutral. And I isolate myself until I have the skeleton of the book. And once I'm ready to fill it out and expand it and let things grow, then I can come home and write. But I still try to maintain a schedule, but that's more to do with discipline than anything else.
Alev, I have a question.
What am I looking at?
I am Eve here. Please, can you see me? Do you hear me?
I can hear you.
Look at Altan.
I'm with Altan. I'm with Altan.
Hello.
Yes, I was so delighted to read your book. And the first thing I read was your acknowledgments. Before I read the book, I read the last part where you had your acknowledgement. And that was so touching for me. You know, you spoke about how you went into your study and you weren't able to write, and then the birds flew into the window, and you know, and on and on. And
that's a true story, by the way.
Well, the reason I was so touched by it is because when we met your parents in Izmir in 1970, they were so delightful, and almost half the time we spent talking about you, because when I, you know, said to them I was an only daughter, and they said, oh, how sad for your parents, how they must miss you. And then they went on to tell all about you, and how when you were little, you always knew you wanted to write. And then I'm sure he said that you wanted to go to America. You wanted to go and study there and so on, as you got older, of course. And he said something like, and our little bird left her nest. And do you see the connection?
I certainly do. That's such a beautiful story. I'm so glad to know that.
And yes. I just remember his hand going, something like, you know, our little bird flew from our nest. She was strong enough to go. Do you see? And I told that to my daughter, because, well, my question was going to be, but you already answered it, you know, why is it you chose the houses to be the voice, you know, that tells the story? But then I understood how, yes, all houses speak, you know, and I do remember going to my childhood house and just feeling all the ghosts of it and so on. I understood why you spoke in that way and chose the house to speak, because they have things to tell us. Yeah. So thank you also. And they were so delightful. I cannot tell you. They were very happy people. I don't know how to say, to describe it, but the memories always stayed with me of them. Yes.
Oh, that's beautiful to know, because I just feel so sad often that I abandoned them, because, you know, I came here, I was their only child, and you could see how much they loved me, and then I just took off and the bird flew away.
Don't ever feel guilty, because I have felt that guilt myself. But I remember saying to my mother, before I married Altan, Mama, if I married this man, I may have to leave you and Daddy and go and live in Turkey. And she stopped and she thought, and her answer to me was, well, you could be married and living next door, married to one of our own, and not be happy. You are loved, Go. Go. See?
Thank you, Eve. That's
Yeah.
I'm
So
grateful.
don't,
I'm really
you
grateful
know,
to hear that.
no.
Fantastic, Eve. Thank you.
How are we doing with time? It's
No time limit.
well, I'd like to make a reference to the bird story. I don't know if the rest of you know the bird story. You know, Sema. Yeah. Anyway, when I was, it was Christmas Day in '85. And I decided, I was running the publishing house then, Mercury House. I decided I really wanted to write. So during my week between Christmas and New Year's, I'm going to isolate myself in my room and write. And I sat down with yellow pads. I used to write by hand then. And we were living in Marin County in the country, and I had a huge picture window with countryside around. And suddenly I looked up and I saw this biggish bird coming toward me from far away. And I thought it was interesting. But the bird I thought would veer off and go somewhere else didn't, came and just flew right into the window and dropped.
Oh.
And I ran to, see whether it was okay. And it was already, the neck was broken and it was gone. And so I was really touched and very sad, and took the bird and kept it in a cold room. Something told me to keep it. We didn't bury the bird. Normally I would have done that. And sat down and started writing. And I didn't come out of that room as I had planned to for almost a week. And, oh, I'm sorry. It was not the Christmas Day that I started. It was a week before Christmas that I went in and the bird came. And I wrote the skeleton of a whole novel during that period, filled several yellow pads. And Christmas Day, I got a call from my mother, and she said, I have the saddest news. Your father passed away on Christmas Day. So, in the way I think, it was impossible for me not to connect, that there was a connection between my father's death and the bird. And then the woman who cleaned our house had come, and she said, what is this bird? And she said, do you want me to fix it for you? I said, what do you mean? She said, my husband is a taxidermist. And I can have him, make the bird.
Unbelievable.
And I used to think that taxidermy, how gross, kind of. But so I said, absolutely.
Oh my God.
So I still have my bird. And if I didn't have to move, I would show it to you. because it's a beautiful bird. It's a falcon. It's called a merlin.
So it's still the original feather, everything, so right?
What?
The feather, everything, because you keep in the deep freezer, everything stays.
Yes, yes.
Unbelievable.
So exciting. I mean, that is so incredible.
Unbelievable. And then this, like when I heard about the fixation, I thought like she will do something creepy. Oh my God.
Yeah, so that's magic realism.
It is.
You know, I mean, who is to know whether it was the spirit of my father who came to visit me, which is what I wanted to think and believe. But it could be just a coincidence. The bird came and...
Nothing is coincidence in this world.
No, you're right. So...
One comment. So I grew up in we grew up in Turkey in late 40s, early 50s.
Where?
Well, I was born in Ankara, but grew up mostly in Istanbul.
Oh, like me. No, I was born in Izmir, Ankara, and then Istanbul. Yeah.
Vega is born in Izmir. Throughout the book, I mean, one forgets the lives of our grandmothers. My mother, both of our mothers worked. They were both teachers, but our grandmothers didn't work. Throughout the book, I mean, one realizes, one forgets how a woman's lives were circumscribed, confined, limited. You say they get this their soul, I mean, they get their identity by being married to somebody. And in fact, sometimes they call, the doctor so-and-so and his wife. So in the book, you mention they get their soul by being married to a guy, and then that way they can go to paradise. So that I mean, at least I forgot how confined, limited women's lives were.
Yes.
In the early part of the 20th century.
Yes. You didn't, yeah. We didn't have souls until we got married. So.
My grandmother had. My grandmother always thought that if he didn't have to marry this guy, she would have been so wonderful. When I married him, she gave me 4 of her gold bracelets. He told me, and I'm gonna say this in Turkish, he said the first time, he says, "Sen baba aptalsın" or whatever, she said, "Take these gold bracelets to a jeweler, cash them out, get a plane ticket, and come back to Turkey."
It's sad though. Where are your bracelets?
Always tell me. She was very smart, but she was married to this with sisters-in-law or whatever. And she would say, would I ever listen to a man unless the society was so horrible? So you study, you have your economic independence, and you never ever let a man walk over you. And as I said, that was what, as we were leaving Turkey with him, he said, "Here are the 4 bracelets," and she took them off her, arm, and she gave them to me and said, "Cash them out, get a plane ticket, and come back home." Let him, I'm gonna say it in Turkish since we're all Turkish. Sana senle diye hitap ettiği gün uçak biletini al, geri gel. That was such a security to me. I waited him to tell me sen, but he never. So I stayed here for 50 years. For God damn it.
And you still have the bracelets?
Unfortunately, I did not have a safe deposit box, and I took them back to Turkey, and I think my father cashed them.
Oh.
I have my IRA, I have my own whatever independence, so I think that I'm safe, don't I? Am I not?
No, you seem to have a very nice husband. So.
I never.
Speaking of grandmothers, I have a quick story to tell you. I have my paternal grandmother, who was about the same age as Esma, was born around 1890, and she was such an independent person, such that she was engaged to this officer in the Ottoman army stationed in Ishkodra, which is in Albania. All right. So she was at about, I don't know, I shouldn't make an error, but either 17 or 16 or 18 years old. So what she does, she had a dada. You know what a dada is, right, everyone? So she had a dada. She was a Pasha kızı. They live in this palace in Üsküdar, Saray, and it burned down later on. Anyway, she took her dada. They got on a boat, and she traveled all the way to Ishkodra in Albania at that time, in 1910 or so, 1908, whenever that happened, to see her fiancé there. Somehow, this is the story. I mean, I don't know all the details, and I only, but I sort of heard this story all my, childhood and whatnot. She was very independent. I've known her when she was, of course, much older, and she was a different person at that time. Anyway, I just thought I would add that on. I mean, there were some independent
Maybe
women.
you have a good story there.
I will go back to Vika's story. Vika.
Married at 15 to an officer. At 20, when the Greek army came, she was 20 years old with a 5-year-old daughter. My mom, for 3 months, they went on an oxen cart, ahead of the Greek army. But she was absolutely, I mean, if she were in another society, she would be another Hillary Clinton. And she would always teach, never, ever, like she would say, if I had an education, which she did have, but in a profession, do you think, let me say it in Turkish, bir erkeğin ağız kokusunu dinler miydim? Yeah, like I would be so independent. I would be out there. And my mother was a math teacher, economically independent. And my mother would call her Sünepe. We wanted you to, be really independent, but you are a Sünepe. Accept conditions. But I'm raising my granddaughter to be the most feminist, independent, yada woman.
So Vika, can I make a quick comment? So if Haluk gives you any hard time, I will give you 5 bracelets, so don't worry. I will say, I'll take this 5 bracelets.
But you can't get a plane ticket with 5 gold bracelets anymore.
Gold bracelet.
Enjoy. I love your stories.
Thank you. Have any of you read The Palace of Tears?
Not yet.
It's a very thin book. It's an epic, really, set in 1850s. And that's another kind of, every family has a yes. Sema is showing it. Has a legend, somebody who was a horse thief or something in the family. Well, there was again, my grandmother and the sisters would tell this story about how their grandmother or grandmother or great-grandmother, grandfather was a Frenchman, and he came to Istanbul and somehow became friends with Abdul Aziz. I think it was Abdul Aziz, and he fell in love with this Turkish girl. And of course, I mean, this is like, things like that don't happen. And I would just say, okay, another legend, but of course I love it because it's a story. And but then over the years, I would think, how would they possibly even see each other? A Frenchman and a young Turkish woman in 1850s. So it turned around in my mind and became the Palace of Tears. It's all fiction. I mean, I don't know, and I imagined it, and it's pretty far-fetched, but still, it's a fun read, don't you think?
Oh, that's so cute. Latifi, do you have a question, sweetheart? Latifi?
No. Do you hear me?
Mute my audio.
Yes, we can hear you. It's fun. We hear you. We did, but not now.
We what?
Unmute my audio.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I can hear you, Vega.
Yeah. First of all, I am very sorry I joined a little late, and I didn't start it from the beginning, and I didn't read one of your book. I'm very, very sorry. I will. And I'm writing also a book, and the poem book, and I prepared an art book. I'm an artist, but right now I'm writing my life also. I'm going to share with you guys one of the interesting story, how I came to America. Is that okay?
I'm not the moderator.
Yes, please, we would love to hear.
Okay. I born in Gordum, which is very close to Polatlı, Ankara. Gordum is Great Iskender Kalktı Not in there. It's called Gordum. It is a Fricks civilization lived there, and they had their tombs and everything is there, which we call in Turkish Yassıhöyük, which is flat hook. And I born there. 1951, Americans came to excavate that hills from, we were very little child in 1951. Of course, that's all of us as a little child. We did not know who Americans are. My father let them have where they need to be. My father was the of that little village, and what they have to live in, what kind of food they can get, and so on. And we used to call him, the Professor Young, we used to call him Uncle Infidel. And we were running, but he doesn't understand us. We don't understand him. We were running around. He gave us a little chocolate we never had in our life, and a little gum. We used to gum and blow up like this and put it our face, like, and it was a balloon. It was so wonderful. good, enjoyable. We didn't have any toys. Our toys were little animals and living in that farm, of course. And I was a very curious child. I used to say, I wanted to run out from the home and follow Uncle Infidel, and wherever he goes, and I wanted to see his village and the children, how they play, what they play, how they look like it. Uncle Infidel's children, Uncle Infidel's village. I want to see Uncle Infidel's village. And now, 40 years, I am in Uncle Infidel's village. And one of my book name is Uncle Infidel's Village.
Very nice title. Good story. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah. We'll look forward to reading it.
Thank you. I hope it's finished, but I have an eyesight, macular degeneration. I'm writing very slowly. First, I will do my poem books because I am a poem writer too. And then it's almost done. And we will be publishing it maybe July. And Gülgün is going to come. Gülgün Feyman is my girlfriend. And she's a reporter in Ulusal Kanal. And then we will publish that, and then we will publish the life stories after. And I congratulate you because I did not know about you, and I will be looking forward to read your books.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Eve, I asked a question to Eve. Do you remember you mentioned about her another book about the water, and you were so amazed?
It's called Taking the Waters.
Taking the Waters, and I think Eve read it. Yeah.
And
We
Imre?
cannot hear you. Eve, we cannot hear you.
You can't hear me?
We cannot hear Eve.
Now?
Yes, now they can hear you. I had
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, well, it's a beautiful book. It's just a lovely, lovely book. And Alev, I've enjoyed it, Taking the Waters. And I've shared it with many friends.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eve. So it's similar in format to Harem. It's got lots of illustrations. It's nonfiction, and again, it's my fascination with mostly mythologies and the sacred elements of water and history of water and the therapeutic aspects of water and water preservation and etc. It was really a fun book to write, and because one of the things is I love hot springs. And it gave me an opportunity to travel around the world and take the waters. And, you know, usually in historical places where the old baths have been there for thousands of years, and they have mythologies about how a horse dug and it sprang up and became waterfalls and things like that. So that's the book.
So last week, Alev, we were talking about your book. So the question was, Seven Houses was originally written in Turkish or English? Which one is? Because I think in Turkey there's a Turkish version, but you started this book in Turkish or English? Seven Houses.
Well, no, I always write in English. The original is always English.
Then it was the translation to Turkish. So it was the question. It was my
The translation of Seven Houses was you know, I don't, one of them was not a good translation. Now I have a very good translator in Turkey. But for, oh, the Harem was pirated in Turkey when it first came out. I mean, it was published legitimately everywhere in 28, you know, some of it's happened slowly, but initially I think there were close to 15, 20 editions, and they were all legitimately. And a friend called me and she said, "Oh, congratulations, your book came out in Turkish." And I said, "No, it didn't. How could it be? We didn't give permission." So it turned out it was pirated.
Earlier, you talked about your books selling in different countries and the names are different. I have two of your books of 7 houses. One is in Spanish, and the name that made sense in Spanish was the Palaces of Memory. But we were talking about Izmir and Smyrna. Of course, the French know about Izmir and Smyrna. So the book was translated as The Ladies of Izmir, Smyrna.
That's
So
a
what
silly
sells?
title.
What
Silly
sells?
title.
Yeah, but that's what sells.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
and
one.
this is the
Like
Italian.
a butterfly.
Yeah, and butterfly in Italian is farfalle.
Farfalle.
And a friend wrote to me and says, "Oh, I love farfalle pasta. It's my favorite pasta."
That's right.
But
can I ask a favor? Can you show the book, a French book again, a little bit? I didn't see the bottom part. The Femi, and it says Izmir, Smyrna. Okay.
Smyrna.
Okay. Yeah, it was my
Smyrna.
question.
And this one is Swedish. Anyway, I only have these around now. I would have to get up and get
But
the
shortly, all of them, the original is in English by you. Okay.
Yes.
Did you write, except the Doğan Çocuks, did you write anything in Turkish, like when you became adult, or you always started as English?
Well, I mean, before I came here, I was writing all kinds of short stories, but I don't think I would want to publish them now.
Yeah.
But I don't know actually. I only have maybe a couple of stories that I wrote then. Maybe in my house, I will find more because my father saved everything I wrote. And so he had he might have some stories. But ever since I started writing here professionally, I've written in English because it just, I can't write in Turkish for some reason.
And I am sorry to ask.
There's a writing language, you know, it's like there's a voice in your head when you write.
When your teacher criticized you, this was Turkish teacher, like you were writing in Turkish?
Yeah.
So maybe, do you know, like it's like English is your language. Maybe in the English writing you are fantastic, and then maybe in Turkish she didn't see this beautiful light. So it is kind of interesting.
Maybe, I think it had more to do with, she had a very conventional form of writing, you know, an essay. And I can write essays now and can write nonfiction, but it was not what came naturally, you know. What we talked about here is, you know, the way my natural mind works. And So that's what she was criticizing. And because I get lots of kudos from my other teachers about, and they encourage me to become a writer. But this one lady didn't like it.
Alev, may I ask just one thing? I say you write in English, but your soul is Turkish. Am I mistaken, or is that correct?
That's correct, I would say.
Okay.
And that's because everything that I've written is about Turkey.
Yes, yes.
Except Taking the Waters, but that has stuff in it too. So, and I will probably continue. Turkey is my prima materia, you know, prime material. And I haven't had any compulsion to write about my American life. Or
what do you think about Japan? Would you like to write something about Japan because you spent 1 year? They have also such a unique culture.
I would love that, but I unfortunately didn't write good journals there, so I have very little. And one forgets the immediacy of that. But, you know, I loved living in Japan, and especially, you know, I was 20 years old and knew nothing about Japanese culture.
This actually was a question in mind, Alev Hanım. Do you usually write diary daily or journey? How do you remember things, you know?
Periodically, I have journals. I use little notebooks that I carry with me, especially when I travel, and write in them whenever I'm interested in something I see. And but I haven't even gone back and read a lot of these journals. So in fact, I pulled them out of the file cabinet and just put it on my desk to read soon. So I'll find out who I was then and what I was seeing and writing about. Because we change, you know, we have different perspectives about life.
Anyone else has a question?
Ben bir şey söyleyebilir miyim?
Go ahead, please.
Türkçe konuşabilir miyim Alev Hanım?
Tabii, tabii.
Ben kitabınızdan çok etkilendim. Bir kere hayatın içinde, kendi yaşamımız içinde yolculuğa çıkıyoruz. Özellikle 7 evde. Yani o yolculuğun içine çıkmamak mümkün değil. Ben mesela annemi hatırladım. Onun annesini ondan duyduğum kadarıyla hatırladım. Görmediğim anneannemi hatırladım. Ve çocuklarımın annemle olan ilişkilerini. Yani çok touchy'ydi. Gerçekten kalbinizin ve ruhunuzun Türk olduğu çok açıkça belliydi. Diliniz İngilizce bile olsa. Ben sizin özel hayatınızla ilgili yani neden inspire olduğunuzu ya da nasıl bu hikayeleri yazdığınızı kitapta yazarken bir şekilde anladım. Yani kendi içinde. O yüzden öyle bir soruya hazırlıklı gelmedim. Ama haremde gerçekten harem, ben doğma büyüme haremliyim. Üsküdar haremliyim. Üsküdar Lisesi mezunuyum. Haremi hiçbir zaman definition olarak nedir ne değildir diye düşünmedim. Hayatım boyunca. Topkapı Sarayı'na da çok gittim çocukluğumda. Okul arkadaşlarımla birlikte. Gerçekten sizden haremi öğrenmek, yani o kadar çok research yaptım ki orada bilmediğim bir kelimede ya da işte oradaki bir şeyde birçok şeyi, Osmanlı ile ilgili bilmediğim bir sürü detayları en azından keşfetmiş oldum, öğrenmiş oldum sayenizde. Ve haremde gerçekten o kadınların statüsü, o günlerde yaşadıkları, yani mesela hem aynı zamanda köle, aynı zamanda da köle sahibi insanlar. Yani altın bir cage'in içinde yaşıyorlar. Bir şey çok beni içten, yani politik bir soru hazırlamıştım ben. Efendim oradan kitabın ön sözünde şöyle bir şey diyorsunuz. Ben de çocukluğumdan itibaren haremde o duvarların içinde neler oldu, o kadınlar, o insanlar nasıl yaşadılar, bunu hep düşündüm diyorsunuz. Ona bağlı olarak kitap yazılıyor ve research yapılıyor. Ama haremin bugüne geldiğini, yani günümüze kadar geldiğini, ne bileyim, benim anladığım kadarıyla bir çarşaflı kadının kendi dünyasında vücudunu bir haremin içinde hapsettiğini söylüyorsunuz. Ya da başka yaşantılar. Bugün günümüzde, şu gün günümüzde olan dünyada bu haremvari yaşantıyı kıyafetlerinde ya da yaşam biçiminde yaşayan insanlar sizce Osmanlı'dan gelen bir gelenekle mi bunu devam ediyorlar? Ya da Arabistan'ın, bugünkü Arabistan'da şeriat kurallarının geçerli olduğu Arap ya da İran, başka yani şeriatı yaşayan, haremi yaşayan dünyada ya da modern dünyada zenginlikle haremi yaşayan insanlar başka türlü bir yorumlama yapıyorlar. Yani daha doğrusu şeriat kurallarına göre Arabistan şu andaki haremi Osmanlı'dan alarak mı yaşıyor ya da kendi işlerinde çıkarttıkları yeni bir Arabik trend mi? Sizce? Sadece merak ediyorum.
Çok ilginç bir soru. Şimdi Osmanlı'dan geldiğini sanmıyorum. Ben sonra işte mesela Hindistan'dayken orada bir haremi, ona zennane diyorlar veya pürda diyorlar. Davet ettiler kadınlar beni, gittim onlarla oturdum, çay içtik, konuştuk falan. Onların tarzı bambaşka, yani daha nasıl şimdi Türkçe konuşmaya başlayınca yine biraz kaybolmaya başladım.
İngilizce de söyle.
İngilizce söyleyebilir miyim?
Tabii tabii.
No, it's I don't think it's handed down from history and being. I mean, when I started developing the concept of harem, then I realized that we have contemporary forms. For example, I use things like the Playboy Mansion, where, you know, these women are kept pretty much. I mean, they can come and leave, so they have more freedom. And they're not really social slaves, but that's what they are. They're slaves. They're enslaved for their needs, and also in Arabic cultures too, like the Sultan of neydi?
Kral Suud kralı. King Suud mu? Yok, Arabistan.
Arabistan'da değil.
King Suud.
Ne? Ama sen bilirsin herhalde.
Katar olabilir.
Katar. United Arab Emirates var.
İpucu ver.
Neyse, bunlar
bir ipucu ver bana.
hiç zengin. Onun için çok kadın tutuyorlar. Değiştiriyorlar istedikleri gibi. İsterseler seks kölesi gibi kullanıyorlar.
Bahreyn.
Saudi Arabiya.
Bütün Arap camiası aslında. The whole Arabic world is like that, I guess.
Evet, yani
bütün Arap.
Mesela Mormons. They have polygamy, which is one of the principles of the institution of harems.
Şimdiki halde İngiltere'de o kadar çok poligami var ki ne yapacaklarını bilemiyorlar. Tabii kanuni geçerli değil ama şeriata hürmet olarak bırakıyorlar. Fakat belki 20 bin, 30 bin aile var poligami halinde yaşayan.
Ama their background
In
supposed to be
Turkey?
Arabs maybe in England maybe.
Mostly, they are mostly from Africa.
Arabs, Africa.
So Alev, the
Yeah.
Mormons, mostly they are keeping each wife in the different house. So like Mormon houses, the guy, he goes, let's say Monday, this house, and that neighborhood, another house belongs to the other wife. So, but the harem, everyone in the same area, and then they are competing each other, like they want to be like selected, elected, so much high prestige is being favored. So it is kind of.
Yalnız our Ottoman harem is different. During that time period, yani zamanın ruhunda, it was Harem-i Hümayun, öyle değil mi Alev Hanım? Yani it was the most preachable, yani en muhteşem education'ın olduğu, yani saraya ait, padişaha ait en iyi education orada alınabiliyor. Müzik, ne bileyim şiir, bugün Hürrem'in yazdığı şiirler konuşuluyor. Yani oradaki kadınlar öyle sıradan kadınlar değil. Onlar aslında çok eğitimli. Aynı zamanda da padişahları ya da şehzadeleri bir sonraki level'da hükümet yönetiminde yetiştirecek kadınlar. Ve yani oradaki üniversite o dönemin ruhunda acayip, yani bugünkü Arapların işte ya da Afrikalıların İngiltere'de yaptığı şeyle aynı şey değil bence.
Yeah, I say the same thing. It is highly prestigious being over there. Do you know, like kind of, they are so like kind of number one, not just in beauty, in the high quality, because Sultan is not just looking at the best beautiful woman, and then they are looking for also like high quality, educated, like you mentioned. It's extremely competitive.
Yani saray entrikaları. I think the woman has some kind of a lot of intricas there in order to gain to power for a temporary time. I mean, it's not going to be forever.
And what kind of power is it? You know?
I mean, yeah, that's true. There's no freedom. But during that time, during that period of time, maybe it was same common things were happening in England, maybe. Same things were happening as well as Ottomans, and I don't know, somewhere in Europe, maybe same thing.
Well,
Kral, 8.
I
Kral.
think the Ottoman harem was modeled after the Greek well, they didn't call it harem, but they Gynecea. Gynecea was the same thing, polygamy and the hierarchy.
I think there was something really very crucial, most important than being captured as a Ottoman entity, as a woman without any statue, without any rights or freedom. Yani hadım olan insanlar, onların belki hiç cinsel aktivite, yani cinsel özgürlükleri ellerinden alınıyor ve hayatları boyunca they don't have any power. I mean, I think this was the most crucial point that harem, it was unfair, I think. It was really unfair for those people who captured from Bosnia or I don't know, somewhere from East Europe or from Arab land, you know.
Well,
hadım edilmek
initially it was the white eunuchs.
Evet, eunuchs.
And but for most of the Ottoman Empire after that, they started only black eunuchs, and they were very much the same way that the American slaves were captured and brought here.
Yeah.
They were, the boys were either sold or stolen from slave searchers. And they would, it was very, did you read the chapter on eunuchs in harem?
I did. It was really, I couldn't take it. It was terrible.
No, a lot of men can't even read that chapter. It's
Çok
very
berbat.
disturbing, and it was disturbing for me to write it, but I had to write it. And
also, Alev Hanım, one of our book club member, Gülşah, I'm not sure she connected now, she's not. She also recommended one of the movie from 1999.
I can't hear you very well, Sibel.
So can you hear me now?
A little better, yeah.
Okay, so one of our book club members, Gülşah, she recommended us movie Harem from 1999. Also, before this book club discussion, I watched this movie. So it wasn't exactly showing the harem life, but that was actually main character was the eunuch guy. And then he mentioned about during the castration, whoever survives during this process, they are coming to the palace, and then they are getting a special education, special training. But it is like unacceptable, like big torture. It is against the human rights. So how come this against the human rights thing right now people just easily showing like presenting from the past? Also harem is against the human rights. So it was interesting movie, a Turkish movie, Harem Suare. But I think it is Turkish plus
yes.
I don't remember other countries.
Ferzan Öztepek?
Yes.
Özpetek. Ferzan Özpetek.
Yes.
Özpetek.
It was interesting movie. It wasn't the best harem movie, but it was kind of interesting because they were focusing the main character is eunuchs.
I'll tell you a joke about eunuchs. When the Empress Eugenie was in for the opening of the Suez Canal in Egypt, she was introduced to some eunuchs that were serving the king at the time. And she said, "Oh, is this a family trait from father to son? Is that goes from father to son, stays within the family?" So it's always a nice joke.
And also Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, they use this. Game of Thrones, they use this concept. They created army from the eunuchs because they don't have any testicular desires. They only follow the commanders, and then all those soldiers, they were eunuchs. So they were so successful because they are just focused for the war and to win. So it is the, I don't remember this group name, but they are full eunuchs. It is like
they say the Spartans. A lot of the Spartans were the same.
But eunuchs did have sexual desires.
Yes, harem Swedish shows the sexual desires.
And they had ways of dealing with it. So, but still, I mean, they would bury poor adolescent boys in hot sand with just their heads sticking out. And they after they castrated them, and if they survived it for several days, then they would be taken to some court. And it was acceptable to them to suffer like that because, you know, they would end up in some court, in some palace somewhere. And if they became in the Ottoman Empire, for example, if they became the chief eunuch, he was the second person in power next to the Padishah. So, what a world, huh? It's
What a
not the
world.
magnificent century.
Alev Hanım, we all enjoyed your books. We enjoyed your company too. Thank you so much for being with us. If anyone else don't have any question, we will end the meeting now because it's been 2 hours. I know you're tired. We asked you so many questions. We tired you with so many questions.
I'm tough.
Okay. We hope to see you in LA. We all hope to see you. Have you signed our books? We're handing our books. We're holding on to our books. See you in
before
LA.
you leave, can I show you something? Just 1 second.
Both these books
Here. Leyla.
Oh, yes.
So it was the famous Leyla book and also Leyla Bebek. So it was Tall event, and after the kind of competition, I am the winner. So it is great memory from you. Thank you very much.
Çok teşekkür ederiz. Çok
Do you
sağ
have
olun.
children?
Once we get over COVID, we'd love to have you at Mercury, signing your books and maybe giving you the same talk, showcasing the Turkish writers.
Yes. There's a young new writer, Ayşegül Savaş. Have you heard of? She's quite talented. I read her first book and I thought, you know, she's a good, she's still young, but she's on her way to, if she continues, good writer.
New Yorker magazine had an article.
Yes, I read her story in New Yorker too. But a novel she wrote, Walking on the Ceiling.
It is actually Lionel Richie's song, Walking on the Ceiling.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it is Lionel Richie's. There was actually a video clip, Walking on the Ceiling.
Yeah. Anyway, you know, she's someone.
I'm sorry, I am jumping
Probably.
because I love.
I think she lives in Paris or London, but everybody lives somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alev, this is so lovely. Thank you very much. It's a wonderful.
Çok büyük bir experience bizim için. Çok özel bir experience'tı. Çok teşekkürler ederiz.
We feel lucky.
Binlerce
for
teşekkürler.
being with us.
Well, I enjoyed it too. It's nice to have a dialogue rather. I like dialogues. I like interaction with people than giving a lecture and then walking out, you know. So it was a pleasure for me too. Thank you. And it was a pleasure to meet you again and Altan, and I'm so glad the story you told me about my parents.
Yeah.
That was a real treat, and all of you.
Biz de çok memnun olduk. Tamam.
Çok hürmetler, sağ olun.
Hope to see you soon again.
Sevgiler.
Herkese iyi geceler.
Çok sevgiler. Her şey için çok teşekkürler.
İyi geceler herkese.
Bye bye.
Hürmetler.
Bye bye.